We know that the onset of depression for kids before they're 14 years old leads to serious issues into adulthood, including more serious episodes of depression, poor physical health, and poor social health, and poorer outcomes with occupational well-being. And so we know that we need to do the work in schools, but just like you said, and we know the stress contagion work that Dr. Kim Schonert-Reichel did, if teachers are stressed, students are stressed. So I believe it's a multi-stakeholder approach. We need to support our leaders in the building, our teachers in the building, our kiddos, and also families. But we've seen interfamilial stress markers. And so we know that we need to come in there and provide additional support and information for parents and families, as well as support our teachers and our leaders. Just like Jody Carrington always says, take care of the big people, just like Chris said, so that they can take care of the little people.
With all that's going on in the world right now, and even in the world of education, wellness has taken, I think, a little bit of a back step. It was sort of front and center as we were coming out of COVID and trying to address that. We recognized that that was such an important issue for individuals and for organizations, and I felt like there was some momentum around that. Generative AI came along and kind of shifted that focus a little bit. And listen, I've been part of that work, and I think it's important work to do. At the same time, I believe that wellness is at the heart of all of this, and that those aren't exclusive conversations to be had in isolation. And in the end, the long-term viability, sustainability of education has to address this. There's so many things to suggest. If we don't, we are going to really, really suffer. And as a result, our students will suffer. So this conversation today, led by Dr. Gina Cherkowski, who is a longtime colleague of mine, well respected in this industry, in this area, and has really been doing some great work looking at the research and how the brain works and all of that stuff, specifically around student well-being. And then we invited in Dr. Katie Fodchuk, who is part of Advanced Learning Partnership, as well as Chris Smeaton, a longtime educator, again, associate of mine for a number of years, who continues to do great work in the area of leadership. And the four of us together really get into a really rich conversation about why this is such a critical issue, all kind of pointing to the Mental Wellness Summit that Gina is hosting in Banff in April. And we will share the details with you. There are still some spots available, and I would really encourage this. This just looks like an outstanding event for so many reasons, the quality of the people there, but even the structure of the conference, that it's trying to do something different that really aligns with the values and the beliefs around well-being. And so I would invite you to listen to their conversation, and you're going to hear some really interesting insights from all three of the guests today, but also just as a primer for the Mental Wellness Summit coming in April 2025. So enjoy my conversation today with Dr. Katie Fodchuk, Dr. Gina Cherkowski, and Chris Smeaton. It's exciting for me to have these three folks on who share a connection to the province of Alberta, but more importantly, they actually share a shared interest in mental health and well-being, and it is one of my very favorite topics because I think it makes everything work. Without it, I think we're in a lot of trouble. Gina, you and I have been connected for a while, and I know you're so passionate about this topic. And as you were on my previous podcast, where I lauded over your work around in the STEM area, I wouldn't say you pivoted, but you added to your repertoire of expertise, a real desire to unpack the notion of mental wellness. And as a result, you're about to launch a very exciting conference coming up in a bit.
Yeah, we're so excited. This is our second annual mental health summit. We're trying to bring together educators, superintendents, principals, mental health leads, wellness coaches, folks in the mental health industry, as well as researchers, to all come together to innovate solutions towards mental health so that we can better support the students in the building, but also the teachers and leaders in the building.
So what would you say? There's been other attempts at having these kind of conferences, and I don't want to say attempts. There have been other conferences around mental health and wellness. Like, what are you most excited about this particular event that might be slightly different or have a different focus than maybe some other events have had in the past?
I think we've gone in to have a little bit of a typical conference feel, but then also have a lot of stuff that isn't typical in a conference. We're in Banff, so the historical relevance of that is that Indigenous folks came together to learn from one another and then part ways and taking their new learnings with them. So I love that we're going to be in a space that has a tradition of coming together, learning something and going away, but also there's a deep history of wellness in Banff. And so folks are coming together to hear from amazing speakers like Dr. Mark Brackett, Kim Shorent-Reichel, Jody Carrington, Jessica Jansen, but also there's opportunities to participate in wellness themselves. We actually have a certified forest bather taking people in through the trees and teaching them about how to really intentionally interact with nature and use that to build wellness for yourself. You're learning the science behind it, but you also get to experience it. There's also yoga sessions, self-compassion retreat. Then we have a musical guest. So we're actually going to treat you to Daniel Powder's like a private concert. And so there's a lot of opportunities to not just learn, but to experience wellness yourself, because I think we all need a little bit of help remembering to take care of ourselves. And then there's time to
Mm.
collaborate and connect. So there's socials events as well.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're on to something really important that people go to conferences for a lot of reasons. And sometimes it is part of just the getaway, but they don't like to say that because that doesn't sound as professional. But now you're saying, like, no, this is actually part of it, that you're going to leave with a big smile. And it's hard to leave Banff without a smile on your face, other than the fact it might be sad that you're leaving. And Katie, I want to talk to you a little bit about Katie and I are colleagues, and has been doing some phenomenal work in Western Canada recently with workplace wellness. And so I'd love for you, because you shared some of these stories with me and I just can't get enough of them. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Western Canada with some school districts that are diving in deep into workplace well-being.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm really excited, Gina, about all the wellness and forest bathing, yoga. And I think that is a big part of workplace wellness. And we think of this work-life balance, and we like to try and say maybe more like work-life presence, so that we don't have to take one thing away to give back to another thing. So being able to be fully present at work and at home with family and friends, and that's a big thing. Some of the work we've been doing with a couple school districts, one in BC and one in Alberta, we're doing some amazing things around wellness, is really not so much focusing on the individual drivers of either workplace burnout or engagement. Some of those might be things like helping yourself feel healthier in the workplace by getting out and going into nature. There's a lot of research that shows that helps. Taking breaks, doing some kind of a body practice like yoga. Those things are all wonderful things that help. What we really focus on with the districts is actually looking at what are the organizational drivers of burnout or engagement. We have some research fact surveys that we've been doing with districts to really identify those specific organizational drivers. Because if we're talking about from an organizational development standpoint, there's going to be specific solutions depending on the drivers. So some of those drivers are work overload, lack of autonomy, lack of rewards or recognition or appreciation in your work, maybe unfair practices, breakdowns in communities, or having values misalignment. And so we really get in and we're very precise in finding out what are the exact organizational drivers, because those are probably going to have more impact on your workplace wellness and engagement with work than even your individual drivers. Like maybe you don't set good boundaries, those kinds of things. So we've been working with these districts. We do full employee survey, and then we really figure out what are the specific drivers? And then we have some really specific solutions to address what's going on in the organization. So the other part, we work with employees across these school districts.
Katie, I'm always curious, and again, I'm not asking you to share any confidential information, but part of why this is interesting work is because people have a perception of what they think the issue is. Like they say vague things like it's the job's too hard, it's stressful, all of these things. But the work that you do is drilling down to let's actually unpack this. When you do this work, give me an example of something that might be surprising that, oh, after realizing this, we found out that people are this is existing that maybe they wouldn't have thought of just if they're looking through their own lens and their own perspective.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're finding that's pretty common, I think it's pretty common in education right now, is a lot of role overload and that lack of autonomy, that lack of discretion in the pace of my work, in my scheduling, in making workplace decisions, and a lot of unclear expectations about how to prioritize work. So that can feel really frustrating and
Yeah.
overwhelming when you don't have that clarity. So then we see things like increase in absenteeism, turnover. We see issues with performance or like an open mindset to try new things or innovative practices. So it shuts everything down. And that's what we're really seeing. But also what we're seeing too is when I gave this to one district and they looked at it, they looked at the data and they said, in the superintendent said, "Oh my gosh, this is awful." And I said, "Actually, you're really high and doing really good on like community values alignment, fairness perceptions, reward, like all those things are deep culture stuff. The
Yeah.
autonomy or the workload, like we can get creative and we can build competency models, for example, to make things clearer about job role. So there are some really specific solutions to all of these drivers, but you go in and you're going with your gut and you're like, let's throw spaghetti against the wall and see if this works. Then often
Sure.
it doesn't work because you don't really know what's driving it until you ask your people.
And I love the fact that there's this appreciative inquiry part of this that says it's not that you're coming in, it's not that everything doesn't suck. If you that's not the case. So let's find out what's, but also makes me think of, and I'm going to transition to Chris, because Chris, I remember a conversation that you and I had years ago when you were superintendent, and it was Holy Spirit,
Yes.
correct? That you were last tenured at. And this was when the government you had a change in government who really was pushing this notion of back to the basics, whatever that was. And it was really potentially going to cause tension between a lot of the innovative work that you had already started in that district. And I remember you messaging your teachers about the fact that there's no curriculum police. Like you have autonomy to do that. And it makes me think of what Katie just shared. And I know that experience over my years is that teachers have a wide range of what they think they can and can't do. And without having like knowing that, like, you're good, like, I trust you, do the work, and you're going to keep doing the work. Chris, I remember you told me like you were very strong to help those teachers saying, just keep doing what you're doing. I'll look after all of that. So in your role, Chris, when you think about leadership and the shift that's been happening with the focus on wellness, what are you seeing today and where we've come from in terms of just this conversation from a leadership perspective?
I think you hit the nail on the head when it's tone at the top, right? And so your senior leader has got to embrace this. And no disrespect to people who look like me, but a lot of leaders in my era were white, male, and jocks. And we grew up in an environment that said, suck it up. Played my junior hockey, you got hurt, you went out and played the next shift, those type of things. That's not the leadership that we require today. And it's probably not the leadership we required for many years, but we're starting to figure that out. Even when I retired 5 years ago, we had a crisis with our students in terms of anxiety and mental health and well-being. What we didn't do well, or some districts haven't done well, is recognize that if we look after our teachers, if we look after our leaders, they'll be able to look after the kids. And so I think the real shift, and that's where this leadership panel, I think, is going to bring some really good insights is, so what are you doing differently than compared to 10 years ago? Because if you're not addressing mental health and well-being of the adults, then your kids are suffering. And I love what you said, Katie, around the autonomy. I think that was a real big piece of when I was a superintendent, saying you don't have to teach every single outcome because they're not equally important. And what's most important? How do we go deep? And so that autonomy piece is really important. But I think when I look at some of the research, it talks about having a strong back, which most of people who grew up around my era had, but also having a soft front and leading with kindness and leading with compassion leading with care, leading with openness. I think those are all pieces that when we're developing leaders today, those are non-negotiable, because our systems won't survive with the old suck it up buttercup mentality. It's just not going to work for kids, and it's not going to work for the adults in the buildings.
I so appreciate that, Chris. That's why I've always enjoyed talking to you, because not only are you running 10K and playing hockey 45 times a week. So I seriously wonder, though, we can't leave people with the notion that the secret is you need to retire and then do all these other things, which some people are envious. But at the same time, I know you are in some ways as busy, as active as you ever have been. And again, your posture hasn't changed over the years, other than the fact that I've appreciated your openness to learn, and your work with Indigenous communities is also very powerful. And so we've got Katie that's talking about sort of system level change. We've got you, Chris, that's talking specifically around the leaderships. And then Gina, I know your work has been a little bit more around the student part of it. And while I'm on board with what Chris says, we got to take care of the leaders first. It's probably not completely a linear continuum, that we actually have to do everything at the same time. So I'd love to hear, Gina, just your perspectives around mental health and what you're finding, because you've done some amazing research and you're sharing these at various conferences. Like, what do we understand and know about this that would be helpful for people to think about?
So we know that if we do some work inside schools, that's the best way that we can build protective factors in our youth. We know that the onset of depression for kids before they're 14 years old leads to serious issues into adulthood, including more serious episodes of depression, poor physical health, and poor social health, and poorer outcomes with occupational well-being. And so we know that we need to do the work in schools, but just like you said, and we know the stress contagion work that Dr. Kim Schoenert-Reichel did, if teachers are stressed, students are stressed. So I believe it's a multi-stakeholder approach. We need to support our leaders in the building, our teachers in the building, our kiddos, and also families. We've seen interfamilial stress markers, and so we know that we need to come in there and provide additional support and information for parents and families, as well as support our teachers and our leaders. Just like Jody Carrington always says, take care of the big people, just like Chris said, so that they can take care of the little people. And it's really important we do all of it. There may be facets that we focus more on, because to do everything at one time and have it be our intentional focus may be difficult, but it doesn't mean we're not moving the needle in with all stakeholders as a group, but just maybe in different ways. And to Katie's point, there is no one size fits all solution to mental health in schools. You really have to dig in and see what are the pertinent issues or the most pressing needs of that particular district, that particular school, because we don't have a one size fits all, and we're in the age of getting to know more information, using data to find precise needs, and then coming in with solutions that are more customized that actually will have impact for that community. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I think what you said too, and it's just a matter of understanding that districts are complex organizational, because it's like a network of organizations, because you have schools within districts. And so really asking folks and being able to drill down to the school level, to the department level, to understand what are some of those different nuances, and then really starting, okay, what's really impacting everyone? What we found in a couple districts was it was rollover load. And one big part of that rollover load, when we drilled down, why are things so overloaded? Too many meetings and not enough time to work. And so that's a pretty relatively easier fix to integrate efficiency and effectiveness in your meeting, integrate AI to optimize scheduling, and have people make decisions about, gosh, I can actually do this asynchronously, versus calling 10 people together for an hour and presenting something to them that could have been an email, right? So that's just one example. But I think when we start to look at these systems and these layers, it does get to that culture. And if you really want to build a culture of wellness, you have to back it up by strong practices, by listening to folks. Chris, you mentioned like that listening and understanding their values and seeing their values and aligning it with the organization. So, one of the things I'll be talking about is how do you actually integrate wellness into your strategic plan? How do you measure whether it is actually happening and adjust that strategy as needed if it's not? Because that's the thing, we need to be able to see these outcomes and these changes in folks.
That's so important. We put it in our strategic plan, and it's not just seen as an add-on. Because if it's an add-on, it'll always be off someone's desk, the side of someone's desk. And yet, when we understand that a culture of care has to be established, when we understand that we've got to encourage open dialogue, when we support with accountability and recognize stress and see what's all, that makes a very focused attention on that. And it can't be just, I'm hoping people feel better or go to the gym and that'll be good. Those are not helpful in themselves, right? In themselves. We have to be very strategic about how we're rolling this out, and it can't be haphazard. And I like the idea, what you said, you throw the spaghetti throw on the wall and see what sticks. It has to be very targeted. It has to be very intentional. And so if it's not in strategic plans, then it's just, like I said, off someone's side of the desk, and that's not going to improve a culture of strong mental health and being in systems.
Yeah, and I think paying attention to the data and the metrics, because knowing where you are when you start and implementing interventions and or providing new supports in there, both for teachers, leaders, and actually for kiddos, to see changes over time, you can then pivot if there's no change or if you need to do something differently. But like you said, we have an assumption if we don't actually know for sure and haven't actually done the accountability measures. So I think that's really important. And then the data will tell the story, and then we know how to better support.
Yeah, one exercise we did with leaders in BC, in a BC district and an Alberta district, was we actually level set on language around wellness. We talked about the drivers, and then we actually said, put yourself 5 years in the future. What do you hope you will see? What will teachers be doing? What will students be doing? How will behaviors change? What will wellness look like, feel like, sound like in your district? And we had them really break into groups and go through, and that became their strategic objectives. And then you can build KPIs to measure all that and track and see, hey, is it going the way we hope it's going? So there's a real science to organizational change. And sorry, as an organizational psychologist, I like to get up on this soapbox, but we can measure change. We can measure whether what we're doing is working. And like you said, Gina, if you don't have that baseline, if you don't know where you are or even what the problems are, it's going to be hard to find those solutions that will work.
As Chris pointed out and Katie, you're saying is like somebody has to own it. Like it's got to be something that we are doing. And what I would, the part that I would say still bothers me is, as much as we have a couple districts that are doing it, and I think Alberta is a little bit ahead in many respects just because of their provincial focus on well-being. That said, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that enough districts have made it the priority that it should. I'm still a little disappointed in some ways because it just, without talking about it, without actually calling it out, I just worry that things can get worse. And we're talking about teacher retention as being a major challenge in education today, and the degree to which addressing workplace well-being is part of that, that has to be significant. So you talk about KPIs, Katie, that like there's a financial implication.
Oh yeah, there's
to all this, like huge
everything: performance, healthcare costs, absenteeism. When you allow people to feel good in the work, they are shown to be more creative and innovative. And it doesn't mean, oh, I'm never gonna work really hard or have a long week. But people need to have breaks. There needs to be a break and there needs to be a recovery time.
Yeah.
And then that creativity is there. And that's what makes organizations great. And community, like feeling psychologically safe with others and being able to share ideas, like all of those things are impacted when we're burnt out, when we're stressed out. We don't get along as well. So there's a lot of implications for this on so many levels.
One of the other pieces that's impacting is the leadership vacuum that's being created. So not only do we have a teacher retention problem, we've got people who have no desire to go into leadership because what it has become. And just like the role is getting so expansive in terms of the what a teacher does, it's the same for a leader. And so we don't have those leaders who are those great teachers who have got great opportunity to lead, taking that next step. And then the other piece in Alberta right now, I think we've got 15 new superintendents coming this year, right? Like, where are they going to be in terms of their own mental health and their well-being? How are we going to support them? And I know our provincial organization does a really good job, but is it going to be enough? Because we've got to develop some really strong, mentally strong well-being to lead going forward. And what you said, Dean, is so true. It's not just students, it's not just teachers, it's all of them. But we've got to be strategic about how we're going to do that. Because if we're not, we're just going to fall down and repeat ourselves again and get worse.
I wonder too, Chris, it goes back to what you said at the beginning around a leadership that was very much white males, jocks, the suck it up mentality, and which sometimes then means that mental health is like, that's not really, like, you got to figure it out kind of thing. And there's less of a maybe an urgency to see it. So I guess I'm tying this into how might focusing on the financial benefits of well-being as opposed to just the moral good that it is might be beneficial for some of those leaders to realize this is not just about being a good guy. This is about real fiscal responsibility that you have. And so I don't know if we can position this in a way that appeals to that group that's not as willing to understand and see the moral imperative that this is, but actually you've got to do this from a financial perspective.
Yeah, so I'll be short on this one. If those people those leaders don't have the moral imperative, I don't want them. I don't want them running my system. I don't want to run my schools. The financial piece will see it, but it always has to be from the why, right? From the moral imperative. And if we're not developing leaders that have that strong moral imperative, then boy, we're doing some wrong things in terms of our leadership training.
100%. This is exciting, and these are rich and powerful conversations. So I want to give maybe Katie a chance just to talk a little bit about the conference in Banff, what her role is, and what she's excited about specifically for the Wellness Conference Summit.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to learn, and I, as an organizational psychologist, I do focus a lot on employees, and that's where my training comes from. And I do think with what we've heard from both Chris and Gina, I'm so excited to learn about that relationship between teacher and student and family. I think there's a community of stakeholders that strong leadership at the district level can really leverage if they are really set on co-defining what does it look like, sound, feel like, what is this vision for wellness? And here's the stuff we're doing. Here's what we found is going on with our community right now. And here's the stuff we're doing to help students. Here's the stuff we're doing to support families. Here's the stuff we're doing to have a conversation about this and bring in many voices so that we know where we're headed. We see where we are and we know where we're headed. And also just excited to hear other ideas from all these great leaders that we'll be introducing. Chris is going to be moderating. I'm always down for learning new best practices in enhancing wellness in the workplace, in the schools, and can't wait for the forest bathing.
And Chris, you're going to be moderating a leadership panel. What can you say about what that's going to look like and what you hope that accomplishes?
I think we've got 6 or 8 panelists with a wide range of expertise. And I think what I would hope the participants come out with is not necessarily, I'm going to take that and do it in my system, but rather there's a great learning. How does it fit into our context? And demonstrate that the importance of senior leadership in leading the cause of strong mental health and good being. Again, you've got some world-class leaders from across Canada, the U.S., that will be able to provide some good, strong insights into not only the importance of this, but here might be some things that you want to look at that might be advantageous in your own system.
And again, I think that's the fascinating part, is that everybody's can do it a little differently. And I think, Gina, what you've set up and tried to create in this event will allow people not only to sit and hear those, be part of that panel, but also afterwards be able to shoulder tap people and say, tell me more. I want to learn more. And so you've provided that. So Gina, why don't you just share a little bit more context about the event? Tell us when it is and whether or not there's any seats even available for people to participate.
So we are about 5.5 weeks away. It is April the 10th for our pre-conference session, which is outdoor play oriented, really interesting and fascinating and fun pre-conference session. And then that evening is a welcome reception, the full day of events on Friday, including a lot of the wellness activities. There's even a chapters and cheers event. So we have a lot of leading authors in the area of wellness, well-being coming there with their books, and they'll interact, mingle, sign books. But that's another place where folks can connect. So if you've listened to someone or met someone and you want to interact and engage, we have a lot of those sort of collision spaces. And then it's Saturday, full day of conference and our wrap up. April 11th and 12th are the main conference sessions in beautiful Banff. We're at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. So it's just stunning up there. And there's so many activities and things to do. Most folks are staying right on site. And there's so many amenities for them there. So it should be pretty epic. And there'll be a lot of opportunity to connect even over lunches and dinners and things. So I really am excited to learn from all of the folks coming. I thank you, both Katie and Chris, for helping support the leadership panel. I do think it's really important to bring leaders together from across North America to talk about what they're doing. It's not a one size fits all. So what they're doing may not fit for you, but we're getting ideas from one another and we're collaborating and connecting and learning all about mental health and wellness. Conversations we never had 5-10 years ago, ever.
Excellent. And is there space available?
There is,
Can
yeah,
people
there's
still
still,
register?
I think, about a quarter of the tickets left. So a few tickets are still left for sure. Get them now, though.
Worthwhile. Again, BAM sounds good. And a website, where can we find all that information?
It's the www.mentalhealthandschoolsummit.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, all three. Again, I could talk about this stuff all day. I think I know that it matters. I don't think it matters. I know it matters. And I appreciate the work that all three of you do in your roles. And so being able to all come together and share that knowledge, I think it's going to be epic. Appreciate you all. And thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dean.
Dean.